Hi everybody, welcome to the Stellium Astrology podcast. I'm Stephanie James, your host. I'm the founder of stelliumastrology.com. I'm the former horoscope columnist for Elle magazine, and I'm a tutor at the London School of Astrology. And today I wanted to record a show for you on the aspects grid and also the elements and the mode grid. And it had to be an enhanced podcast episode because it's just a bit difficult to kind of try and explain without having the image in front of you. So if you're listening to this on an audio platform like Spotify or iTunes, be aware that I'm recording this for YouTube as well. So I will put a link in the description so you can come and watch this video on YouTube if you so wish. So I decided to look at a celebrity chart to explain this process. The celebrity that I decided to pick was Johnny Depp. Let me just share my screen. Not for any particular reason other than I just I don't know why I picked him. I was listening to the Joe Rogan Experience last night, and I thought I think he got mentioned. So yeah, I thought he popped up in my mind when I was thinking, who can I look at? Who can I use as an example? Now he has a AA rating, which if you remember me saying way back when I first started this podcast, there are different types of Rodden rating. Lois Rodden is the person who kind of categorized the quality of data that we receive and whether or not it can be trusted. So we can see here it says birth certificate or birth record in hand. We have a AA, and it was collected by Steinbrecher, who I don't know who that is. So Johnny Depp was born on the 9th of June 1963 at 8:44 a.m. in Owensboro, Kentucky. Now he was with the Rodden ratings. The AA is like the top quality stuff that you can trust. It's the good stuff. A is kind of like mother's memory. B, there's, it's not completely trustworthy. C is definitely some issues around perhaps maybe the date or the time has been misquoted in a few different places. So we kind of, maybe have more than one. We're not really sure. There's some discrepancies. Then you've got dirty data, so double D, and dirty data is really untrustworthy birth data. Could be that there's one person going around telling people lots of different dates of birth, that kind of thing. Like Princess Diana, I think she had she told a different birth time to different astrologers. There's a few celebrities with I think is Hillary Clinton one of them. We're not entirely sure. I don't know if it's Hillary Clinton now or if it was, yeah, I think it's Hillary. So you have a few different birth times for her that you can't necessarily be sure that they're exactly accurate. And then you've got X, which is just there's no birth data whatsoever. We don't even know how accurate the date we have for them is for their date of birth. So, and just while we're here at Astro Databank, so normally what I would do is in the search bar, I would type in Johnny Depp birth chart, and then I'd scroll down and look for the astro.com record. And if there wasn't one, then I could go to a different website and just have a little look, but I wouldn't necessarily take that as, if it's not on astro.com, I don't generally trust the origin of the data. Basically, this is as far as it goes. This is like the kind of Google Scholar of astrologers, where we've got the whether or not the data is trustworthy. So whether you can trust your sources, basically. And yeah, you get a little biography down here, which you can go to the Wikipedia biography, and then you've got relationships, so you can have a little look and you can see who he's worked with, and who he's is that his daughter, Olivia Munn? I think so. No, can't be. I don't know. And oh look, no, Lily Rose, there she is, and Jack John. So there's his children, parent, child. And then you've got what's that say? Spouse or equivalent relationship with Kate Moss. I forgot he dated Kate Moss. and Vanessa Paradis. We will definitely have a little look at hers. But anyway, so I thought it would be interesting to have a little look. As you can see, it tells you events as well. So you've got lost his virginity at 13. We have the date that he 1976. This must have come from an autobiography or something. Started smoking at 12, lost virginity at 13. He started young, didn't he? Arrested for vandalism in 1994. We've actually got a chart for that because we have a time for it. And yeah, change in family responsibilities, daughter born. So you can have a look at all these different charts. It shows you in equal or placidus what, you know, these major things here. Amber Heard filed for divorce. Is Amber Heard on here? No. But yeah, so you can see, maybe we can have a look at that, maybe. So basically then you've got source notes where you've got the information from the biography, and also birth certificate in hand as well. And then he's got different categories that he's listed under. So appearance, gorgeous. Personality, eccentric. Blah, 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 blah. Social life, misfit. And there you go, famous, top 5% of profession. So you can have a look and see, and you can also click on top 5% of profession, and then loads of people come up who are also equally as successful as he is. So let's have a little look at his chart if we go into it. So we'll go into, I go into equal house because that is who I am and what I do. I'm an equal kind of girl. I do like Placidus, actually. I do like looking at intercepted houses and things like that. So here's Johnny Depp's chart. And as said before, 9th of June, 1963, Owensboro, Kentucky, 8:44 a.m. And we know that that's quite accurate because the birth certificate has been seen in hand by the collector, the data collector. So Johnny Depp has got 12/26 Leo rising, 18:03 Gemini sun in the 11th house, and 13 degrees and 49 minutes of Capricorn moon, which is on the cusp of the 6th house. It's in the 6th house, but it's very close to the cusp. So it's very close to that power point, that super ejection of concentrated 6th house stuff. That sort of divides the sky up. So a very powerful placement for the moon, really, if you think about it, being so close to the 6th house cusp like that. Now, what we're looking at is down here. Firstly, here you've got your modes and elements grid. So that's a little grid, 4x3, and you've got down the left-hand side, fire, air, earth, and water, FAEW, and along the top, you've got C, F, and M, cardinal, mutable, so cardinal, fixed, and mutable, or fire, air, earth, and water. So this little grid's really quite a good one to have, because you can look at it and almost glance and see what areas of the chart are underrepresented and what are overrepresented. But if you can't do that at a glance, I'm going to show you how you can do it now. Firstly, you can go, so let's have a look at the top. Let's go for cardinal signs first of all. So he's got, in cardinal fire, he's got Jupiter. In cardinal air, he has nothing. In cardinal earth, he has his moon. And in cardinal water, he has his north node, which I don't bother to count as far as this grid is concerned. And then in fixed, along the fixed levels here, you've got fixed fire, ascendant. In fixed air, you have Saturn. In fixed earth, Mercury, Venus, and midheaven. And in fixed water, he has Neptune. I'm just making a note of this because this is how you do it. You draw the grid out yourself. It helps. Now in mutable, he's got mutable fire, nothing. In mutable air, he has Sun. In mutable earth, he has Mars, Uranus, and Pluto. And in mutable water, he has Chiron, which I also don't bother to count. So it depends. Everybody's different. This is why astrology is not a science, it's a craft, because you interpret what is right for the person interpreting the chart, basically. So what you do is you give 3 points to the big three, so sun, moon, and ascendant. Each of those placements get 3 points. Then the personal planets, so Mercury, Venus, and Mars, all get 2 points. And then the social planets, Jupiter, you can give a point. Some people give a point for Saturn. Some people deduct a point for Saturn because of the nature of Saturn. It depends on the strength of Saturn in the chart that you're looking at, really, and whether it feels quite a strong or prominent placement. And then for the transpersonal planets, you generally give about half a point. So let's have a quick look. So he's got in his cardinal column, he has Jupiter, so that's 1, and then the moon, which is 3 points, so that gives us 4. In the fixed column, we have the ascendant, which is 3 points. We have Saturn, which you could say sitting on the 7th house, he kind of projects that a little bit. However, it's the ruler of his moon. So I would say that there's a bit of, it gives it a bit more strength. So I'm going to give a point for Saturn. And then you've got Mercury and Venus and the midheaven in Taurus in fixed earth. So that's 4 points for that. You can add a point for the midheaven if you want to. I don't generally tend to. And then you've got Neptune as well. So that's half a point. So you've got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then 8.5 with the Neptune placement as well. Even if you didn't want to have Saturn there, if you wanted to deduct a point for Saturn, that would still be 7.5. So that's still very high. And then you've got in the final column, which is mutable, you have the Sun, which is 3 points, Mars, which is 2 points, Uranus and Pluto, half a point each. So that gives us 6. And then Chiron, which I said I don't count. So that's 6 points. So at the moment, it looks like he's very fixed, which yes, he is. He's got the ascendant. See, he's got his Taurus stuff sitting up there, his personal planets. So that does seem quite a strong fixed flavor. So if we want to go along now and look at the rows, starting with fire, we'll add that up. So we have again fire. We have Jupiter in cardinal fire and his ascendant in fixed fire, which gives us 4 points. Then we have in air, we have his sun in mutable air and Saturn in fixed air. So again, let's give it 4 points because I did give a point for Saturn before. And then we have in the earth row, we have the moon in cardinal, so that's 3. And then we have Mercury and Venus, so that's 7 points in fixed earth. And then in mutable earth, we have Mars and also Uranus and Pluto. So we'd go 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Is that right? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Gosh, that is a lot. And then we have in his water row, all he has really, because we don't want to call like the nodes, not really, he has Neptune in Scorpio in fixed water, so that is half a point. So actually he has got his most heavily represented mode is fixity, and his most heavily represented element is earth. So what's fixed earth? It's Taurus. So that means Johnny Depp has a very strong Taurian flavour. So what's underrepresented? Well, I think we can all agree without too much hesitation that water is massively underrepresented. He only has Neptune sitting in water. And he also has, let's have a look, cardinality is underrepresented in his chart as well. So cardinal water is Cancer. So his least represented sign is Cancer, and his most represented sign or essence really is that Taurian essence. So that's interesting to look at. And what you can do as well is look at in the chart which areas of the chart those signs represent. So obviously heavily influential Taurian flavor sitting at the top of the chart there, incorporating his midheaven, his 10th house cusp if you're using equal, and his Mercury and Venus conjunction, all sitting up there in a very, very high point in the chart, culminating almost, you know, right up there in full view. If you remember me talking before about the horizon, the ascendant descendant being the horizon, and all the planets above the horizon is what we see, they are the highest up, they are the most visible, and they sit in an area which is very well known for public image and reputation, and kind of a very Capricorn-esque kind of flavor area of the chart, displaying, you know, your achievements, your ambitions, and you know, kind of the authority that you are. And let's say, I mean, we can all agree that he is very much an authority in Hollywood, or has been up until more recent years. So yeah, so that's interesting, isn't it, to see that, to have a look at that and see how Taurus plays such a key role. And you can see that Earth is a very strong, you know, it's very heavily represented in the chart. All of the little symbols that are green here are all in Earth. So if you were just looking at a glance, you could say, I'm seeing a lot of the greens, so I'm guessing it's heavily represented. And as we've figured it out, as we've written it down, it does appear that he's got about 10 points in Earth, and that was without even including the midheaven. And yes, and if you have a look at for blue, now you can see that he does have the North Node in Cancer, the Chiron placement in Pisces, and then Neptune in Scorpio. But like I said, Chiron's an asteroid. You could include it if you want to, but that still is still hugely underrepresented in the chart. And the nodes just don't, that I just never factor them in when I'm doing the weighting exercise. But it's down to you if you feel like it's something you would want to do. So interestingly, Cancer is also on his 12th house cusp, which is a very intangible, an area of distortion in the chart, somewhere that we aren't very readily in touch with. It's that area where we're opening the door, and whatever's behind the door is kind of like that 12th house, and obscured from view behind the door type of thing. If you were to push the door outwards, there could be somebody hiding behind that door that you can't see, and they're still obscured from view. Even though you're looking out your front door, they're still obscured from view. So it's an interesting area, and the fact that that is an area of his chart that he is very out of touch with is interesting to me. So again, you might want to look at the moon and think about what that means for the moon in that context. You know, it's interesting because obviously the moon being the ruler of the 12th house, and the 12th house being where we reach out to our sort of, it's more than just the collective, it's more than just the social group. It's almost that unboundaried area where anything that we have, any placements there, it kind of leaks and seeps out into the collective consciousness as such. And he's very much part of the collective consciousness with all of the films that he's created or been part of. So it's interesting because he is doing that kind of work. However, I think he's fallen into the kind of the opposing Capricorn side of things, which is very much turning that kind of contact with the collective consciousness into a bit more of a grind, that 6th house grind of churning out films like Pirates of the Caribbean and all the Tim Burton stuff that he ended up doing. It was just, it ended up being, instead of being a kind of variety, it became a very fixed money-making thing for him. And Joe Rogan, I was watching the other night, was talking about how unrelatable, when he started making the Pirates of the Caribbean films, which was obviously the Disney franchises, how it just eventually turned him into like one of the most unrelatable people who, you know, he can't go anywhere without being recognized. He couldn't do anything without being recognized. And, you know, the amount of money he has to spend on his wine habit and other habits for that matter. But let's say for his expensive wine habit, spending about £500,000 a month on wines and indulging in those finer things in life. You know, it's somebody who can afford to do that isn't somebody that you're necessarily going to really understand very easily. So that's interesting. And you know, interesting as well, because even though he's got that strong fixity and that strong earthy quality, he has that very mutable and airy quality to his chart with his sun in Gemini, which you'd imagine he'd like to have the ability to have variety, to have different choices. So it could, you know, having that heavy weighting of, you know, earthy and fixed sort of placements keeps you in one place, doing one thing, churning out the same sort of stuff. Whereas with the sun in Gemini, it kind of desires that freedom of movement and that variety and those choices. And, you know, anything that gets a little bit samey gets quite stale quite quick. So that's quite an interesting chart to look at. Now, if we look over towards from the elements in the modes grid, we would look over at the grid for the aspects, and it's like a kind of Chichen Itza stepped pyramid, zigzagging down from the sun all the way down to the Pluto, North Node, Chiron, Ascendant, Midheaven. So you've got this little zigzaggy step thing going on. Now you can see there's lots of different symbols inside this grid. You've got, let's go for the sun. So the sun is at the top, and the one next to it on the next step down is the moon. So that square represents anything that might be related, aspecting between the sun and the moon. So the sun is not in aspect to the moon in this chart. Then down again, the sun is not in aspect to Mercury in this chart. The sun is not in aspect to Venus. It's Venus is in aspect to the moon and Mercury. So Venus is sesquiquadrate the moon and is conjunct to Mercury. Easy to see that in the chart with the conjunction with Mercury and Venus, because Mercury, it says here, conjunction with a little symbol for conjunction, and then it's got a 1 and an S, and it's in red because it's considered to be a major aspect. And though it's a mutual aspect or a neutral one, I should say, it is actually a what do you call it? It's kind of a hard aspect because it's an important one. So the harder and quite important aspects highlighted in red, and then the softer major aspects are highlighted in blue, and then you've got some of the other more, so like the sesquiquadrates and the semi-squares and things like that aren't highlighted. They're in black because they're not as major. And then you've got the quincunxes, which are in green. Makes it easier to spot those because they're also a bit of an uncomfortable and difficult aspect to work with. So let's do the sun anyway. So let's do Mercury and Venus very quickly. So that conjunction, it says it's in conjunction, and then it says 1 and S. Now the 1 means that they're 1 degree apart, 1 degree of orb apart. And if you have a look at the S, it means that the conjunction has already been perfect and is now separating. So if you have a look up and see, you can see that Mercury's at 25 degrees and 17 minutes of Taurus, and Venus is at 26 degrees and 6 minutes of Taurus. So that means that Venus has passed Mercury, and now that aspect is separating. So it's come together and now it's just separating. Let's move down to the sun again. So the sun is sextile. See this little symbol here? And it says here 4S. So that's 4 degrees of orb separating from, and we go across, Jupiter. Let's have a look. So the sun's at 18 degrees and 3 minutes, and Jupiter is at 13 degrees and 59 minutes. So generally a sextile, any wider than 4 degrees doesn't really count. The sun made that contact and is going to be moving out of that sextile pretty soon. So there we go, 13. It's basically 13:59. It's basically 14, isn't it? So you've got 14 degrees, 15, 16, 17, 18. So it's a wide sextile, but it still counts. So you've got your 4 degrees of orb, and separating sextile. And here we go, below it, we have a trine applying between the Sun and Saturn. If you move across, you go down from the Sun, you see that trine symbol, and then move across to the right, and you've got Saturn sitting there. So that means that the Sun and Saturn are in communication with each other, and they are 5 degrees of orb apart. And actually, this is an applying aspect, which means that the Sun is moving towards Saturn. So let's have a look. Yeah, they're both in air signs. The Sun is at 18 degrees and 3 minutes of Gemini, and Saturn is at 23 degrees and 5 minutes of Gemini. So actually, that is 5 degrees, give or take a few minutes of arc. And as you can see, the Sun is at 18 degrees, so it's behind, because obviously as it ticks around, it never goes retrograde. It ticks forwards, so it will be 19 the following day, 20 the day after, and so on. So in about 5 days' time, the Sun and Saturn will be in an exact trine. So there you go. So that's applying. And then you can go down again. The Sun is, there's a square here, 3 degrees of orb, and separating from Chiron. So let's have a look at Chiron. Chiron is in Pisces, 14 degrees and 53 minutes. So again, quite at the end, almost 15 degrees. And then 16, 17, 18, you've got the Sun. There you go. So there you go. And that is, the Sun has passed that as well. So that means it's separating. So hopefully that has cleared that up for you, and you can kind of understand what you're looking at when you're looking at an aspects grid, and also what you're doing when you're working out planetary weightings, how you figure that and score that, if that's how you do it. You know, it's quite obvious when you look at that grid, you can see so much green. You're like, yeah, that looks quite heavily Earth represented. Sometimes it's a bit harder, sometimes it's really equally distributed, and sometimes it's really sometimes it's very weighted in one way or another way. I had a friend who was in a relationship. She was underrepresented in her chart with cardinal air, and she attracted a Libra, and they were in a relationship for about 3, maybe even 4 or 5 years actually. And they both they attracted what they lacked in each other. So it's worth having a look and seeing what you lack and where you're attracting that experience, what that person's bringing to you, because they're kind of almost making up that area that you can't kind of integrate yourself. So that's quite an interesting thing to look at. And yes, just understanding how to look at the aspects grid, because sometimes it's like you're looking at a chart and you think, oh yeah, you can look at the chart and you can see the pattern in the middle with the different lines meaning different things. But actually, when you look at the aspects grid, it can be almost at a glance a bit more information. It can be a bit more useful and easier for you to kind of understand. Hopefully you found that you can apply this now in your own chart, and you can have a look at your friends' charts and figure out which elements and modes they are most in tune with and which ones they lack. And ultimately sort of figuring out, if you haven't listened to the elements and the modes episodes, go back and have a listen. But actually the elements and the modes really tell us about what drives us, how we deal with conflict, what is our motivation, and how we engage with our environment. So it can give you that added depth of understanding, because even when you look at the chart and you think, well, they've got Sun in Gemini and they've got Moon in Capricorn, you can reel off the cookbook stuff, you can reel off what those things mean. But if you understand that actually they have a heavy fixity like Johnny Depp, and they're very earthy, it gives you this other aspect to, or this other, a deeper understanding, a deeper dimension of how they interact with their environment. And yeah, check out my Patreon page. I make videos for my patrons, and I'm going to have a little aspects pamphlet type thing that you can download for free from the Patreon page. So thanks very much, guys. Take care, and I'll speak to you next time. Bye.